This is another video for those of us that struggle with the STAAR. We're going to be talking about domain and range today. And domain and range can be some pretty easy questions. There's two things that we absolutely must know in order to get these. And that is that the domain is your X values and the range is your Y values. So that is our big concept. I mean, it's not going to guarantee that you get everything, but it definitely puts us on the right path if you just at least know that one thing, that domain is X values and range is Y values. Now, domain and range is typically like cropping a picture, if there is a picture. And so like you think if you take a picture on your phone and you crop the picture to get rid of all the stuff you don't want. And so you will be looking at that today. And that is the domain would be cropping the X-axis, which is the left and the right. And the range is cropping the Y-axis, which is top and bottom. And so once again, if you know that domain goes with X and range goes with Y, you should be able to do this. Also, if there's a picture, if there's dots on there, it's always good to count the dots, because if there's 10 dots, then there should be 10 answers. If there's 2 dots, 2 answers, 1 dot, 1 answer. And then the last thing we're going to be looking at is if there is a dot, then if there is an open circle, so an open circle would be it's not filled in, then there's no equal to bar. And if there's a closed circle, so it is filled in, then there is an equal to bar. And, you know, sometimes we even have some kids that may forget some of this stuff. But like I said, if you can take care of this, you're either going to get the answer or you're going to at least get it down to a 50-50, usually. All right, so let's check out the first question. Now, when you are looking at a question, you have to identify what the key word is. And so here it's domain. And so domain is the X's. And one of the things we try to train kids to do on domain and range, especially of a picture, highlight, so if it's domain, highlight the X-axis, because domain is X's. Now what that's going to do is that's going to draw your eyes. The answer has to come from this right here. So it's going to draw your eyes to this right here. So if you start looking over here for your answer, you're like, wait a second, that's not the highlighted area. So we highly recommend that you highlight this. Also, look at your answers. So we've already said domain is X's. That already eliminates a couple of these. I would continue to look at my answers because it kind of gives away that it's got to be -4 and 2. So you can see we talked about cropping a picture, that if we were to crop this right here, that it would hit -4 and it would get rid of all that stuff on this side. And if we cropped it right here, that it would hit 2 and it would get rid of all this stuff here. And so, you know, we can see why it's -4 and 2. The question now comes down to the circle. So you want to just pick one of these. You can see one's open, one's closed. So I'm going to pick the -4. And -4 is an open circle. So an open circle does not have an equal to bar. So when I come down here, this -4 does, this -4 does not, and the open circle should not have an equal to bar, so the answer should be C. And then, of course, you could look, if you did the other number, this should have an equal to bar on 2, so 2 does have the equal to bar. All right. So first off, we find our key word. Key word is range. We're going to highlight the key axis. Range is the Y, so I know my answer must come from the Y-axis. I do notice that there's 1 dot. I should have looked at the other one. Was 2 dots. They all had 2 answers, but still I should have looked at it. So this has 1 dot, so there should only be 1 answer, which they all have 1 answer. So unfortunately, that hasn't helped. All right, so now, and all of these are Y's. So haven't been able to eliminate anything so far. So we know that we're cropping a picture. And so if you forget where you're supposed to go, that's where the highlighted area comes in. So range is the Y. We're cropping the Y-axis. So we're going to cut this off right here. From that dot, just go to the Y-axis. And what do we see? We see 8. So you know it's not going to be A. You know it's not going to be C. So it's got to be one of these two. Looking at your answers, the only difference is equal to bar and no equal to bar. And once again, that's an open circle, so open circles are no equal to bar, so that would be D. Okay. All right, so here, first off, we have our keyword is domain, so we're going to highlight the x-axis, and I want you to notice I'm very disciplined in this because I know that if I take care of this, if I know that domain is x's, and I highlight the x-axis, I have a really good chance of getting this right. So I know it's not D because we said that it was an X. But then I want you to count how many dots do you see? Well, I see 4 dots. So 4 dots means that there should be 4 numbers in my answer. Well, these two both have 4, but this only has 2 numbers. Well, there's no way it can be that one. All right, so now we just simply have to go from each dot to the highlighted area. So we're going to the x-axis. I got -1. Both of these have -1. This one goes to 1. Both of those have 1. This goes to 2. Well, that's the only one that has 2, so the answer's got to be B. And of course, if we finished it up, it would be 4. So from each dot, we just simply went to the highlighted area. Remember, that's why we highlight it, so that it draws our eyes there. If you don't highlight this, it's really easy to look at this and think that that 5 has something to do with my answer, and you would think it would be A. So we're always going to that highlighted area. So we highly, highly recommend that you highlight. Okay. All right, so keyword here. Notice there's a lot of words up here. If you kind of look at your answers and start working your way backwards, you can see the question right here, and usually in the question is the keyword. Our keyword is range. So range is the Y, so we're going to highlight the Y-axis. So I know my answer has to come from this. All right. How many dots do you see? I see 2 dots, so there should be 2 numbers in my answer. So I got 0 and 150,000, 0, 2,000. This only has 150, so that can't be it. And this only has 2,000, so that can't be it. So just knowing these 2 dots right here got rid of half of my answers. And you can see that both of these have a 0, so we just want to know, is this going to go to 2,000 or 150,000? Well, there's no way this is 150,000. This has 150, and then you see it's in thousands, so 150,000 would be that one right there. Well, which one comes from the highlighted axis? Well, 2,000 is definitely going to come from the highlighted axis. You may not even understand why, but the fact that you highlighted this means that it's got to come from 2,000. Well, the reason why is because when we crop our picture, it hits 2,000 when we crop the top of our picture right there. So the answer would be G. Okay. Okay, so these are not pictures, and this is even easier. So you can see my keyword right here is range, and range means it's the Y values. So all we're going to do is find the answer that has these numbers, but these don't necessarily aren't in the same order as these. So here's the easiest way to do this. We're going to take -3. If it doesn't have a -3 in it, mark it off. So B doesn't have a -3, C doesn't have a -3, so we're marking it off. If it doesn't have a 9 in it, we'll mark it off. So that has a 9, but that does not. All right, we only got one left, and that's A. So I would start marking it off. I would look at each answer and mark it off till you're left with one answer. And that's going to be it. All right, so domain here. Domain is the X's. Now this one can get kind of confusing because it's set up as points. And so it alternates X, Y, X, Y, X, Y. So X's are first. So these are my X's. And I noticed that all these say -2. So it's got to have a -2 in it. So that one doesn't. But the rest of these do. And then there's only one other number. So if it has any more than this numbers, it doesn't count. So we have 1 right here. And this one doesn't have a 1. This one has -2 and it has 1, but then it also has a 3, and there's no 3s for the X's. So it can't be that one. So the answer's got to be D. Alright, so domain, now we're back to a picture. So domain is X's. And so this one's a little tricky. So if you get lost on this one, I don't want you to stress on this one. But when I go to crop, so remember, this is like cropping a picture. When I go to crop this, because I see the edge, and I'm like, oh, I need to go up to this, we have a rule: you cannot crop an arrow. So I can't crop an arrow, because an arrow means it keeps going. So I can't crop it because it's going to keep going and going and going. Over here, I can't crop this right here because it's going to keep going and going and going. And so when you go to look at the left and you go to look at the right for the domain to go up to the highlighted area, if there's arrows, you can't do it. And if there's arrows on both sides, then the answer is going to be all real numbers. So you see this right here, that the domain can be all real numbers. Okay, but that's simply because there's arrows on both sides. Okay. All right. Now this one, kids go, oh, look, there's arrows on both sides. But this time we're going with range. So remember, range is the y-axis, and it's the top and the bottom. And so, yes, I agree that there's arrows on the top, so we can't do anything on the top. But there are no arrows on the bottom. And so the bottom, we're going to draw a cropping line. We're going to crop this to the highlighted area, and we hit -1. And look at your answers. There's only one of them that have a -1, and so the answer's got to be B. So understanding range is top and bottom. Domain is X's, which is left and right. The last two were kind of the more difficult ones. So if you struggle with those, don't stress over those. Take care of all the other easy ones, and you'll be just fine. All right, well, I hope this helped.